Cold Calling 101, the controversy. Is it worth the time and effort? Is it even worth doing? Yes, we're going to continue this conversation for at least this video and maybe another beyond this one. Good afternoon. I'm Larry Hendrick with The Magnum Life at www.themagnumlife.com. In the last video, I talked a little bit about preparation work for cold calling target accounts. Didn't really go into details, although I have some very specific details that I would offer for doing target accounts, but I want to skip and talk very briefly about ad hoc cold calling. Ad hoc cold calling is one of those probably most of controversial types of cold calling, because it's not only totally unprepared as far as preparation goes, but it's also unprepared as far as even knowing who the target is or having a list. What I mean when I say ad hoc cold calling is when you're making a sales call in a particular area and you finished an appointment and you come out and you've got maybe 2 hours before another appointment in that same area. So obviously you don't want to go somewhere else and then come back. You just want to stay in that area. So you have a couple of choices. You can either go to the coffee shop and have some coffee, or you can make a couple of ad hoc cold calls. If you've been in your business, your industry for very long, you have an idea of what your target account might look like, or particular maybe your target customer. And so if you say deal with property management companies in high-rise buildings, 4 stories or more, 6 stories or more, whatever, you know your criteria, and you see that there are 4 buildings in that immediate area that fit that criteria, it might be worth your time to try to gather some information to see if they are, rather than suspects, potentially prospects. To me, that's ad hoc cold calling, non-preparation, just stopping by to see what you can find out. Now, even ad hoc cold calling needs to have a purpose. You need to be able to define what you're going to do. When I say unprepared, I mean just from research on the company, not unprepared as to what the purpose of what you're doing is. Obviously, you're wanting to see if you can find out whether or not this suspect could be a prospect, and potentially even do some qualifying during the call. So if it's, say, property managers in multi-story buildings, you stop. Very easy to find out where the property management office is in a building. They're wanting you to find them to rent office space. And you can usually go in and find out very quickly if they're a part of a corporate, if they're a standalone office, if each facility that they have is standalone, if they're a part of a national property management corporation. There's a lot of information that you can find very quickly by visiting with either a receptionist or a secretary. Frequently on that kind of call, you would have the opportunity to talk to a property manager. I have found out all kinds of information in those kinds of settings when I've worked for companies where that was the prospect. Very quickly was able to find out if it was indeed a prospect that needed some additional work. Maybe a phone call to set an appointment for a demo, maybe a phone call to set an appointment for a presentation from the information that was gathered during the visit. Lots of different things can come about as a result of that. Now, percentage-wise, I never found it to be as high a closing ratio as, say, a prepared cold call on a target account that I knew already was a prospect. But if you go out and make a couple of cold calls, and as an end result gain one additional customer, that's not bad. Whether it's one single large sale or multiple small sales, that's not bad. As I said in the last video, you have to be judicious in your time, knowing who your target accounts are, what your average sale per account is, so that you know how much time to spend on ad hoc calls or even prepared calls on target accounts. Lots of different things you need to look at. So, are ad hoc calls a total colossal waste of time? I don't think so. I think if you have some idea as to your customer base, you can generate something out of it instead of just going to the coffee shop and killing a couple of hours. So, you know, in that case, gaining a customer over a period of a few weeks after a little bit of qualifying, and I'd say that was worth the time. If, however, you look around an area, there's nothing that fits your profile, maybe you need to go to the coffee shop and finish up that presentation, or even go over that presentation, make sure there's no typos, that the information is correct for that next call that you're killing time until. That might be time better spent. Only you can tell, because you know your target customers, your prospect customers, what kind of lists you have, or if there's even anybody worth spending time with in the area that you're in. Those are just things to think about. I don't know that there's a perfect answer, but I know that with a little bit of forethought, a little bit of planning, even from the stage of knowing what kind of customer is a target and what your average sale per customer is, to give you that kind of leverage as to what you need to do with that extra 2 hours you've picked up. Well, that's it for this video. Again, I want you to make sure and be careful out there. It's getting more dangerous out on the roads every day. I can vouch for that. Have a wonderful time and just be safe.